it's Darby from rejoiceandcreate.com. Thanks for stopping by today. Well, this is the second part of my series on what to do with these. And these are pre-made card bases. And they're 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. And of course it starts out with 8 1/2 inches and it's folded at 4 1/4. And I have quite a few boxes of these. Well, maybe not quite so many left because I've been kind of using them up, but I wanted to find out some projects where I could actually use these to create some three-dimensional little treat boxes and bags. And this is what I came up with. Now my first week I did these 3 projects on top, and these are created with 1/2 of a card base, which means that you start with a piece of pattern paper or cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Today we're making these, and these use an entire card base. So we're going to get right into it and start with this little project right here. Alright, so let me go ahead and bring up my whole big scoreboard and we'll go ahead and get this scored. Take your whole card base and put it up, long side up, and we're going to score it at 3 1/2 and at 5. Now it's already scored at 4 1/4, but if you're starting with just a piece that's 8 1/2 by 5 1/2, go ahead and score it at 4 1/4 as well. So you have 3 1/2, 4 1/4, and 5. Turn it to the side, and we're going to score it at 1 1/2 and at 4, which is essentially just 1 1/2 inches from both sides. All right. Okay, so now before we fold and burnish our score lines, we're actually going to do some cutting first, because this center panel on the sides, on each end of it, is going to be the front and the back. So we want to make some neat cuts on the inside of those score lines, just to that first horizontal score line. Okay, so now let's go ahead and fold and burnish our remaining score lines. Okay, now these 2 sides on both sides are going to fold in and create that center box, but you'll notice that they're sticking out a little bit, they're a little bit too long. So what I'll do is I'll just fold that over and I'll just eyeball it and cut this right inside that edge. And it doesn't have to be neat, and it doesn't have to be any particular width, as long as you're inside there so that the edge is, this can be glued to the edge and that won't show out the other side. All right, repeat that on all the others. And this is what you have. All right, so before we put it together, we're actually going to punch a hole for our handle and go ahead and fold it right in that center fold line and line those edges of the center up again. Then take a shape that you like, or you can use a die as well if you want to run it through your die cut machine. But I'm just using this little oval punch that's a retired Stampin' Up! Punch. I'll put it down a pleasing amount, probably maybe about 1/2 inch from the top of the punch, and I'll punch it. And this is an oval punch that is 1 3/8 inch long and 5/8 of an inch wide. All right, so let's go ahead and glue our little box inside together. And I'm going to use some of the Tombow Extreme. Okay, so just take a side and match that score line up with this side and glue it together. All right, now that score line in the center helps kind of squeeze it down a little bit. And you have a very cute little bag. Here, let me bring my other one back in for a minute. All right, so let me decorate this one and I'll be right back. Yes, as you can see, I have the matching dog and cat punches from Stampin' Up! I thought they were pretty cute. But as you can see, it makes a very cute little bag, and you can tell someone that they are the cat's meow. All right, so that's project number 1. Let's do project number 2. All right, so this is the project we're doing second. It ends up being a little pocket box. And I went ahead and rounded the back, and I'll show you how to do that. If you don't want to, you can just leave the back square and then just cut an angle on both sides. And let me get my scoreboard up. We'll get scoring on this project. All right, so take your card base or your 8.5 by 5.5 piece of pattern paper or cardstock, and with the 8.5 side up, score it at what, 1/2 inch? Score it at 3.5 inches. It is already scored at 4.25 inches, although if you're using a piece of cardstock and not a base, go ahead and score it. And then turn it to the side and score it at 3/4 inch on both sides. And you can turn it around and do that, or you can do it at 3/4 and 4.75. All right, so that first 1/2 inch score line we're going to fold out. I liked having a little bit of a contrast along the front edge of this pocket. And let's go ahead and fold and burnish the rest of the score lines too. All right, let me turn it this way so you can see the pink against the white. And as I said, I did want to make a little bit of an arch in the back of my box. If you don't want to, that's fine. Just go ahead and start putting it together like this. Skip this step. But I'm going to use a bit of a wider circle, and I'm actually using the larger salad plate or the smaller dinner plate. So what I'm going to do is make sure it touches right in the center and make sure that the distance on the edges are both the same, so I know I'm right in the middle. Just use a pencil to trace and cut it out. All right, while I have the scissors out, let's go ahead and make our tabs for the bottom. Go ahead and cut up the longer rectangular side and just notch into the little square on both sides. All right, so let's go ahead and glue down that front flap. And I'm going to burnish it pretty well. And then I'm going to go ahead and reinforce the score lines. All right, so let's go ahead and glue it together. Pull those in. Go ahead and just do a little bit of adhesive on the outside of those tabs and on the inside flaps of the front of the box. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put that back up and attach those tabs to the bottom of the back sides. And then I'll push the front up and match this fold line with the front. All right, now this is what I have so far. If you left it square, I would cut it right from this part here up to the corner and just make a nice little angle. As it is, I'm going to go ahead and trim that a little bit so it looks a little more gradual if that bothers you. So it looks more like that on both sides. All right, so let me go ahead and decorate that and I'll be right back. All right, so this is my original one, and as you see, I just did some washi tape around it. I put a little gel pen in there. There was an older stamp set which actually had a matching punch, and let me see, it was called 4 Frames and Sweetly Framed, and it had a matching label punch that went with it, and I went ahead and used that one. And what I tucked in there was just some butterfly sticky notes from the Dollar Tree, and I just had to trim that green backer off a little bit, so I went ahead and opened it up and I just trimmed it down on both sides so I could just tuck it in a little bit smaller. But there are a lot of things that you could find to fit in there. In fact, I didn't have any more of these sticky notes, so what I did for this one is I did a tea theme, and I went ahead and stamped "Love is a warm cup of tea." I still placed the washi tape around it just to decorate it quickly, and I put a couple of these Celestial Seasons tea bags in here. Each one of these contains 3 tea bags in here. So there's 3 black cherry, 3 raspberry, and I actually stuck in a couple of these honey sticks, which I got at the World Market, and this is what they look like, honey sticks, and it makes a nice little addition to some of your tea gifts. All right, so that's project number 2. Let's go ahead and get on with number 3. All right, so this is our third project for today that uses a whole card base, and it's actually a little satchel. And I actually used that little dot closure that I did with the paper, ruler, scissors, box Back to Basics video, but I was experimenting with some different shapes, and on this one I used a star. One thing I would have changed, and I'm going to change it on this one, is instead of just using the punched out star from the card base, I would actually punch out something heavier underneath it, like a piece of heavier weight cardstock, and glue this to the cardstock so that when you push it down over there, it actually will pop through a lot easier. One of the other things I do on this one is I actually used a border punch, and if I would do that one again, I'd actually just use the border punch on the white paper, and then I would glue the stars on instead of actually punching through the front. But I think it turned out really cute, and let's go ahead and get going on it. All right, now this is the one project that I had to actually trim off a little bit of the card base, because with the 4 1/4 inch score line, to make the satchel, which would work, I had to trim off 1/4 of an inch off this one side of the paper, one of the short sides of the card bases. And after you do that, it'll line up this 4 1/4 inch score line at the 4 inch mark. So after you trim that 1/4 inch off, align that side that you trimmed to the left side of the scoreboard, and that will put this score line on the 4 inch mark, and then it'll work. Score it at 3 inches. We have that score line is now at the 4 inches because we trimmed off that 1/4 of an inch. We'll score it at 7 inches, and we'll score it at 8 inches. And one other thing you'll notice is that we only have a 1/4 inch glue line on this one. Now, one note, if you're just starting with an 8.5 by 5.5 inch piece of cardstock or pattern paper, don't put the 4 1/4 inch score line. Just line it up and score it at 3, 4, 7, and 8, and that will give you a 1/2 inch score line. But because I'm working with a pre-made base and the score line was already put into it, I had to accommodate it by trimming that 1/4 of an inch off the one side that I butted up on the left, which gives me the 1/4 inch glue line on the right. All right, let's go ahead and turn the short side up now, 5.5 inch side. And if there is a directional pattern that's up, make sure the up is to the right and the bottom's to the left. And we're going to score it at 1 inch, 3.5 inches, and 4 inches. All right, so we have that 1/4 of an inch glue tab that we're going to have, but we don't need the bottom part of that, so let's go ahead and cut that off. And while we're on the bottom, let's go ahead and cut our tabs free by cutting on the rectangle side of the score line straight and notching into the square side of the score line. And the same with this one. Okay, so when we put this together, this is going to be our flap that will flap over the front of the box. So that's pretty much our top. The rest of these we do not need. So we're going to cut off these 2 sections. Here, let me mark them off. These 2 sections, these 2 sections, these 2 sections, and these 2 sections. So go ahead and just cut neatly down this side of that flap so we have a very neat top of our box. And then cut right below the score line all the way across. Okay, that's what we've got. All right, let's go ahead and fold and burnish our score lines. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is round these corners on the top flap of my box. Of course, you can do this at any stage. If you forget to do it now, you can always do it before you finish the box. And let's go ahead and glue the box together. I'm using some double-sided sticky tape. Okay, so now before I put the rest of it together, I'm going to bring this fold line up to this fold line evenly, just to give myself a side pleat right there on both sides. As you can see, the top will come over it and the side pleats will close. All right, so now let's go ahead and glue the bottom. And this is the front, so that flap will come over last. Okay, so the last thing we have to do now is to create our little closure. So I'm going to use a flower for this one, and I've already cut out a white cardstock base to back it on. Let me go ahead and put my flower over the top, and I think it would work well with lots of little shapes like little hearts. The little star worked pretty well. I think it would have worked better if I had backed it with something stronger. Now I'm going to very carefully lay it the same way because this flower is not symmetrical, so I want to make sure I glue it properly. All right, let me go ahead and glue it together now. Okay, so I have it glued together and I have it lined up the same way I'm going to put it over there. So I'm going to use a double-sided adhesive foam. And let me just turn that over so I have it the right way. Let me put one of these small ones and right in the center. All right, so let me go ahead and line this up. I'm going to close the lid or close the flap, and I'm going to match the shape of my flower up with the shape of the hole that I cut it from. All right, let me push it down a little and kind of pop it through. I don't want to pop it off until I get a chance to really push it down. All right, so now that I've got it open, let me really push that down well. And you want to make sure this really sticks because the foam adhesive is what's going to be holding the closure. Pop that through, and that's how you keep it closed. All right, so let me go ahead and decorate this one, and I'll be right back. All right, so just like this one where I went in and I punched 2 holes and made a little bit of a jute twine handle, put my jute twine underneath this star that says "Be the Star You Are." And on this one I went ahead and used a 1/8 inch gold ribbon. I used some faceted gems on both the closure pop dot as well as the little flower, and I got my little flower from Recollections, and I just took out the centerpiece and used the smallest flower from that. And I went ahead and used an old stamp set that was just a little itty bitty banner that says "Thank You" on it. So these are the projects that took an entire pre-made card base to create, and I think they came out pretty cute. If you haven't seen the half card base ones, I will put a link below. I hope these 2 videos help you to use up some of your card bases that you may have sitting around. Let me know what you think of it. And if you like the video, please subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to be notified of new videos as I post them. For more information, please visit rejoiceandcreate.com. And as always, until we meet again, I hope your days are blessed. Bye!